I have gotten two jury summons in my lifetime, and sure as I've shared it now, I'll get one in next week's mail. The first one, I was living in Tulsa, and you go down to the courthouse and you're sitting around in this room and sitting around until they call you out, and then the attorneys kind of quiz you on will you satisfy what they want in terms of a member of the jury. And when I said, well, I'm a minister, and that's pretty much all I needed to say, and I was dismissed because I think they had a sense that I was going to probably just go with with what I saw as a facts, and facts are facts type thing, and probably had a solid view of truth. Well, anyway, I did get finally on a jury, which honestly, that first attorney was right, because when I heard the story, it was real clear to me almost instantly how the matter should be settled. Thankfully, I was not made to be the what do they call that? The chairman? Not the chairman, but anyway, I wasn't the lead guy. So my brief experience in the courtroom, and dealing with judgments, and then the last time I was living in Las Vegas, and this was after my heart attack. And when I responded back, well, I've got heart issues, they said, no, you don't need to bother. So I have a very limited base of experience for the justice system as a participant. But this idea of justice, we talked about it last time, is a big idea in the Bible, that God is a judge. He is a lover. He's our Father, and He will judge. There's a few places in the New Testament that they don't stutter. One is in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27 says, "It is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment." Now, the Hebrew writer doesn't go on to explain what does that judgment look like and what's the nature of it. But in Revelation, a little more of the picture gets revealed. This in Revelation chapter 20, there are about 5 verses 11 through 15 that describe how this is after death or the end of time. There will be this judgment, and books will be opened. And the real bottom line on the judgment is, if your name doesn't appear in the Lamb's Book of Life, you will be assigned to the lake of fire. There's all kinds of ideas of how that will transpire, what it will look like. I remember when I was in high school, one of the most frightening, and now I look at it and think theologically flawed concepts, was that we would stand before the judgment seat with the throngs of billions of people who will be there, and on a huge screen for all to see will be this movie of my life and all the crap that I've done. I'll be totally humiliated. And the point of that, one of the girls in our youth group did this as a big reading at a youth rally, which, honest to goodness, my walk with Christ was not very shaped by youth rallies. And so if yours was, man, good for you. But, anyway, the point of that reading was to scare us so that you don't want your movie to be that bad. That's not what happens. I don't think. The scriptures leave it a little bit fuzzy, but they give us the specific that this whole judgment thing is not about, did you measure up? This is not about explaining why you did all the things that you did. It's really about one simple thing. Either you're in the Lamb's Book of Life or you're not. It's It's not a terrifically complex kind of thing. In Acts chapter 17, Paul is preaching. Well, I don't know that he thought of it as preaching. He was dialoguing, and he said, God has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed, and of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. So Paul identifies this judge, the man, as Jesus, so that Christ will be in the judgment seat. Again, what I get from that, and you probably ought to do your own study of especially the final judgment, because it is crazy the number of ideas there are about the final judgment. But there is this idea. It's even from the Old Testament. In Ecclesiastes 11, Solomon writes, rejoice, O young men, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. Now that, before the cross, before the redemption, before grace made the payment for every sin, judgment was all about getting what you deserved. And if you did good, you got good. If you did badly, you got bad. It was really fairly cut and dried. And for the Hebrew, for the Jew, it was all about, did you meet the standards of the law? And by the time Jesus came on the scene, the Pharisees had kind of reduced this away from what was your heart in a condition that your obedience flowed out of love. It was all about, did you do it? I don't care where your affections were. I don't care the condition of your heart. I mean, did you do what the law said to do? And they treated Jesus very badly, and yet felt that they were in full compliance with the law by doing so. Well, so what's the point of the judgment? I think there are 2 points. One is, we will give an account. Paul writes about, you'll give an account for every idle word. I'm not sure what that means. I do know what it means on one level, which is, if I'm going to give an account for it, then I ought to pay attention and be careful, right? My behaviors matter. There is a sense in which I am accountable for what I do and what I say. So what grace doesn't mean is that you can say or do anything you want to say. It really doesn't matter because Jesus got you. So, just let her rip. No, that's what Dietrich Bonhoeffer, it's in the bucket that he created when he coined the phrase cheap grace. That's not consistent with the rest of the Bible. The rest of the Bible says it is grace that makes it possible for you to steward your life in such a way that you steward your accountability well. The bottom line, in my opinion, comes down to what Paul wrote in Galatians 6:7. He starts out by saying, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. And he goes on to say, if a man sows to the flesh, from the flesh he reaps corruption. If he sows to the Spirit, from the Spirit he reaps life. The point is, there is this law of harvest. And I think it even applies over into this final judgment. The most significant thing to sow, according to Revelation, that what was it? Revelation 20, which, now by that time we're at the end of John's revelation, for whatever difference that makes to you. But at any rate, the big thing I want to sow is the decision to say yes to Jesus. Now, some people believe that you make that decision, you pray the prayer, or you get baptized, or you do whatever the particular religious denominational traditions are. And that, your ticket's punched. Now you're going to heaven. How's that feel? There are other people who say, well, I know you did that, and yeah, but you know what? If you haven't covered all your bases, I don't think you're getting in. There are people who believe that it's impossible to lose that once you have gained it. And there are others, and they seem to have a reasonable argument. There are others with an equally reasonable argument who say, you cannot accidentally lose that status, but you could reject it, turn from it, walk away from it, and then you're no longer in the status of saved. Your name can be taken out of the book of life. And this takes us more deeply into a lot of theological controversy that's not the point of what we're doing here with soul care. The thing I want to try and get across is my saying yes to Jesus and embracing the grace of God in my life, which makes it possible for me to sow to the Spirit so that I reap from the Spirit life, that it is grace that saves me, not my effort. And Paul makes that clear in Ephesians chapter 2. It is God's grace that this is all about. And the judgment, the only reason that my name will appear in the Lamb's Book of Life is because I accepted God's grace on His terms. By grace, through faith, not effort. So does effort go away? No, I think I've said it many different times. Effort doesn't go away. It gets recontextualized. It's not so that I can be tight with God. It's because He has drawn me into this close, deep, fulfilling relationship through the agency of His grace. Not so that, because of, which once that distinction gets made in my mind, I become free to live well and steward the opportunities that God brings my way. I become what Paul talks about as a steward of God's grace in its many forms. So the judgment comes back down to, I think, one book. Am I in it or am I not? And there are people who believe that on the basis of our accountability as people in the book, right? Our names are there. Then there is this next layer of reward on the basis of how well did I do as one whose name is in the book of life. I've read fairly extensively in terms of what men and women have written regarding that, and I remain a little bit unconvinced, and here's why. Because when I read Scripture, when I get to the place in for instance, in Revelation 20, 21 and 22, by the time the judgment has happened and my name is found in the Lamb's Book of Life, whether I live in a big mansion or a smaller mansion, whether I'm down Main Street or I'm on a back street, I don't believe any of that is going to matter to me, because I I'm finally home. The end result of this judgment for me, in my opinion, is it will come after my death. And the second thing is, if my name is in the Lamb's Book of Life, my home is heaven. And so I'm no longer threatened by the idea of judgment, but I can't pretend that judgment doesn't exist. Well, I've muddied the water sufficiently, and I've burned up 15 and a half minutes doing so. I'll close and look forward to connecting with you again this way on Soul Care with Stevie Boy next time.